Hey there everyone, welcome to my Retro Media Room. Today we're looking at 5 360 games that are backwards compatible through disc only, meaning it was either delisted from the store or it never existed in the store digitally in the first place. Now if you happen to already own any of these games digitally, you're good to go. Otherwise you have to insert the disc in order to give you the license to download the game. If you like this sort of content, please hit that subscribe button, the notification bell, and the like button to help me with the algorithm. And please comment on the video. I'm always excited to hear from the community, whether it be questions, feedback, nostalgic stories, whatever the case. There's always a lot of enthusiasm and love, and I really appreciate you all. And with that, we'll get started. And starting our list is 2011's Mortal Kombat, otherwise known as Mortal Kombat 9, developed by NetherRealm Studios and published by Warner Bros. Interactive Entertainment. So there are a few issues, unfortunately, that I need to address with Mortal Kombat. First off, if you have saved progress on your Xbox 360, when you try to transfer it over through the cloud like you normally would, for whatever reason, the Series X or even Xbox One are unable to recognize it, so you have to start all over again. So if you're like me and you poured a lot of hours into the game, unfortunately, the only way you're accessing that again is going back to your original 360. Additionally, when it comes to the DLC and extra characters, in my case, I own the Combat Pass from back in the day, so I have access to all my characters like normal. And I can only attest to booting up the vanilla version of the game because that's the only version of the disc I have. In regards to the complete edition of the game that's supposed to include all of the DLC, from what I hear, it merely boots up the game as if it's just the vanilla version. If you have first-hand knowledge about this that you can shed light on, please let us know in the comments. And finally, the game has a tendency to crash. It crashed at least 3 or 4 times on me during the making of this video. So that's definitely not good, and it was pretty annoying. Otherwise, this is definitely a nice way to play Mortal Kombat 9, and of course it's the most modern way to play Mortal Kombat 9 on consoles. Some of the minor upgrades include a little bit better image quality, so it looks pretty sharp, loading times are nice, and the frame rate is going to be a lock 60 during fights. Although it has some weird little hiccups in between matches, that's not during gameplay, so it's really not that big of a deal. It's more of an engine hiccup. So I've been playing Mortal Kombat since it first came out on the Super Nintendo back in '93. And around that same time, I also had a chance to play the arcade version. So I've been playing Mortal Kombat pretty much since the very beginning. And out of all the Mortal Kombats, many of which I love, all the way up until 11 for me, this one is actually my personal favorite. When this first came out in 2011, it was such a breath of fresh air for the franchise. A fun and robust story mode that does a great job of introducing you to all the characters and mechanics of the game, so if you've never played it before, that's a great way to start. Unreal 3 shines here, the art direction of the stages look fantastic. This was easily one of the best user-friendly Mortal Kombats at the time. It did a great job of bringing in both casual gamers and veterans alike. Easy to learn combos and moves, a fantastic roster of characters with Smoke and Melina being my 2 favorites. Easily the best iterations of those 2. But the fact that you're able to just press both of the triggers to activate the X-ray combos was fantastic for newcomers. Not only can they be clutch in a fight, but they look fantastic. You can literally see it X-raying through the body where you see the bones breaking, and it's really cool. Easily inspired by the Sonny Chiba movie, The Street Fighter from 1974. Of course, you have your ultra gruesome fatalities, which I'm not going to show here because of monetization reasons. The flow of the combat is just so good. I've always loved this game. There's nothing like getting somebody in a corner and doing a devastating corner combo. There's also lots of additional modes. There's a tag team option that's really fun in co-op. There's a challenge tower where you do all sorts of different scenarios to earn points in order to take those points and spend them at the crypt where you have tons of things to unlock. So there's a lot of meat and potatoes here. Lots of stuff to unlock, tons of stuff to do. That's why it's disappointing that my old save file wasn't able to transfer because I unlocked everything in the crypt. But at the end, it's just an excuse to play this again. It may have some issues through backwards compatibility. It's not perfect, but it's absolutely still worth playing, and this is a nice way to play it on a modern console. Mortal Kombat 9 is definitely worth tracking down a disc so you can fire this up on your Xbox Series X. It's still a classic. Next up, we have 2008's Battlefield Bad Company, developed by DICE and published by Electronic Arts. As far as the backwards compatibility upgrades go, it's pretty run-of-the-mill. The image quality is a little bit sharper, the performance is more stable, and the loading times are faster, so all of that is pretty standard fare. Interestingly, from a historical perspective, Battlefield Bad Company was actually the first Battlefield game that DICE put out for consoles, with the full-length campaign at that. While PC gamers had already been enjoying Battlefield's sandbox large-scale battles, it was a nice way for console players to finally be able to tap into that playstyle. This was also the first iteration of the Frostbite engine with its destructible environments, which was very impressive for the time and still holds up quite well today. Man, you can't help but love the fact that you want a door, you create one in any given building. Very, very fun. You play as Private Preston Marlowe, who has just joined this elite squad who are taking on Russian mercenaries while the United States and Russia are at war. Along the way, they discover that these Russian mercenaries are trading gold with each other, so they take it upon themselves to go and steal this gold. And that's the setup for the story. I really enjoyed the back and forth banter between the characters, even to the point that they're playing rock, paper, scissors with each other. It's pretty funny. The gunplay feels really nice here, nice animations and detail to the weapons. A minor gripe I have is that you're only able to have one primary weapon and one piece of equipment, say an RPG along with an M4. Not the end of the world, I just wish there would have been a little bit more you could carry. To be fair, the squad actually does a pretty good amount of work here. The AI is pretty smart and they actually carry their own weight. I like the fact that the enemies aren't bullet sponges, they have nice animations, so it's very satisfying to take down enemies. I do have a few other gripes though. The field of view is way too zoomed in, even for the time. When you hop in a vehicle, the field of view feels great, but as soon as you're on foot, goodness gracious, it is zoomed in like you have binoculars on. The sprinting feels so slow, and as if you're running in place, it's just like that scene in Monty Python the Holy Grail when John Cleese is continuously running towards the castle. And probably the worst problem with the field of view is the fact that it's hard to locate enemies anytime they're near you. Because your field of view is so narrow by being so zoomed in, whether you're to your immediate left or right, it's easy to miss them and you're sitting there getting shot and you're spinning around in circles trying to figure out where they are. Hence why field of view is so important in the likes of Call of Duty multiplayer. Another minor gripe is the muzzle flare. Some of the muzzle flares are so big and over the top, it blinds you in the middle of gunfights. So it's a little bit much. While I really like alpha effects, explosions, loud guns, I love everything to have oomph to them, but this is a little bit much to the point where it's hard to see. Alright, enough complaining. This game actually has a lot of redeeming qualities and I can absolutely see why it has such a fan following. It was very well received back in the day. Whether it be you're driving around throughout the landscapes taking on enemies, blowing up buildings, taking on objectives, you name it, there's a lot of fun to be had here. I really enjoyed checking this out because I'd never played it before. So if you like Battlefield console campaigns, well, this was the first one, so you should go and check it out. Up next on our list is 2013's Batman Arkham Origins, developed by WB Games Montreal and published by Warner Bros. Interactive Entertainment. In terms of backwards compatibility enhancements, nothing particularly special was done. The frame rate is the same base frame rate, just a little bit more stable. The image quality is slightly enhanced, nothing crazy, and the loading times are faster. The only problem I ran into is that the game did crash a time or two, so don't be shocked when that happens. As the title suggests, Arkham Origins is actually a prequel to Arkham Asylum because it takes place 8 years before the events of that game. So if you're like me and you never fully got around to the Arkham games, this is a good place to start chronologically. Now there are a few caveats to playing Origins first. It's a bit of the red-headed stepchild of the bunch. Not to say that it's a bad game, it's actually quite solid, but it's not quite as good as Arkham Asylum, Arkham City, or maybe even Arkham Knight. Part of that is the fact that Rocksteady Studios is the original developer. They developed Arkham Asylum, then Arkham City, which was a huge hit, and since they were deep development with Arkham Knight, they went ahead and handed development over to WB Montreal. A couple of changes that could be disappointing to some is the fact that Kevin Conroy is not Batman and Mark Hamill's not Joker. Rather, it's Roger Craig Smith as Batman and Troy Baker as Joker. They do excellent jobs here, but if that really means a lot to you, it's going to be a bit of a downgrade. There are some things that critics pointed out back in the day that I actually still agree with, particularly with the fighting system. Rocksteady created a revolutionary combat system. Lots of fun, very free-flowing, really cool. Perfect for Batman. This one maintains that, but it does a little bit too much and it ends up tripping on itself. Too many enemies at a time, along with too many gadgets you're able to use that are more or less effective than one another, so it kind of makes things a little bit too drawn out, a little bit too frustrating. The flow of combat's not as good. So overall, the combat, while still good, is not as good as it could have been compared to Rocksteady's approach in the other Arkham games. They also pointed out that they didn't really do anything to push the envelope for the open world Gotham compared to Arkham City, so it's about the same as you would expect, if not slightly worse. Now that doesn't mean bad. The game is really good, in fact, I was really enjoying myself. Just don't expect it to be as good or better necessarily than the Rocksteady Arkham games. But the open world is rather impressive nonetheless, especially for that generation. Unreal Engine 3 here holds up really well, lots of detail, lots of atmosphere, very cool looking game. One aspect that was brand new for this game is how Batman is able to recreate crime scenes in order to figure out puzzles. While it's rather rudimentary, visually it's very cool. And it really does give you that Batman detective feel that's usually lacking in a lot of Batman games. So if you're a huge Batman fan, you're going to appreciate the fact that they brought out his more detective side in this game. So if you're a big Batman fan and you haven't gotten around to it, it's worth tracking down a disc so you can play it through backwards compatibility on your Xbox. And the next game we're going to look at is 2006's Enchanted Arms, developed by From Software and released by Ubisoft. Before Elden Ring, before Dark Souls, there was Enchanted Arms, also directed by Miyazaki. So if you're a fan of From Software, you might be interested to check this game out, although it is nothing like those titles. This is a JRPG through and through. Also, it was one of the first JRPGs to come out for that 7th generation of consoles. As far as the backwards compatibility upgrades go, standard as usual, image quality is nice, frame rate is at stable 30, nice loading times. Nothing special here, no bells and whistles. Even though I know this has a cult following, I'm gonna be honest, I wasn't sure how I was feeling it at first. Some of the tone and dialogue and voice acting was a little bit weird to me, although switching it to Japanese helped. Even though I loved turn-based battles, they were feeling a bit generic to me at first. You play as Atsuma in an enchanter school along with your friends, Mikado and Toya. While they're charming and everything, I just wasn't sure how much I was really interested in this whole school student setting. A little bit of elements of Final Fantasy VIII, a little bit of elements of Persona. It kind of has that typical anime school thing going on, which, give or take, may or may not interest me. But as I kept playing, as the story unfolds, as the battles got more intense, I then started to get it. And I walked away quite intrigued by this game. It was a pleasant surprise. The only part I didn't walk away appreciating very much at all is the music. It's not that great. I gotta be honest, it's pretty grating. Which is a pretty big deal for an RPG, but otherwise, I was rather enjoying it. While the music may not be that great, the graphics are actually quite nice. One thing that's interesting about the combat is that everyone's on a grid, so it's got a little bit of turn-based strategy mixed into its traditional turn-based battle system. So inherently there's more strategy involved where you place your characters. Like I was saying before, I enjoyed the battle system the more I played it, particularly the fact that you can have over 100 different golems that you're able to synthesize, all of which have their own independent movesets and you're able to have them in your party in any order you want, so that's a lot of variety in the combat. It's always interesting to me when a game may not start off great to me, but then ultimately I end up being pleasantly surprised by it, so that's always a treat. Also, the more you battle, the more you realize how good the animations are. Lots of cool combat animations and powers. So I'm really glad that this is still backwards compatible even though it's disc only, because this is a game that deserves to be experienced by Miyazaki fans as well as JRPG fans, because it's a pretty under the radar game. It certainly was for me. I'd never played it before this. So if you want a JRPG you may not have ever played, especially if you're a Miyazaki fan, you should definitely check out Enchanted Arms. And finally, we have 2006's F.E.A.R. Originally developed by Monolith Productions, the 360 port done by Day One Studios, and released by Sierra. When the entire F.E.A.R. series on Xbox 360 became backwards compatible, everybody was excited. And for good reason, they're all very cool games. That's why it's kind of crazy that the first one and its expansion Files became delisted, and due to that are disc-only backwards compatible. Thankfully 2 and 3 are still listed, so those you can download at your leisure. Now this does have some bells and whistles with its backwards compatibility enhancements. The image quality is better than ever. It has a 60 FPS frame rate boost, so it's twice the frame rate it originally was. It looks and plays great. It's almost like upgrading to PC how good it looks. Also, this has the same graphics engine as Condemned Criminal Origins, also from Monolith. So the lighting effects here are very nice with a lot of detail. Where the engine truly shines is in the slow motion gunplay. Particle effects, ragdoll physics, lighting, it's really awesome. And looks better than ever in 60 FPS. F.E.A.R. has always been an interesting first-person shooter because it's just as much a horror game as it is an action game. So due to the horror elements and smart enemy AI, the atmosphere here is pretty top-notch. F.E.A.R. has a fan base for a reason. These games are really cool. The guns are fantastic here, especially in the slow-motion combat. Whether it be a submachine gun, dual-wielding pistols, or the shotgun, very, very satisfying combat. There are few things as satisfying as throwing a grenade into a group of enemies and then they blow up in slow motion. You gotta love it. Also, there's a cool challenge mode you're able to do that still has leaderboards for your score. Then there's the expansion F.E.A.R. Files that was also released on the Xbox 360 by Sierra but developed by Timegate Studios rather than Monolith. Eventually, Monolith was purchased by Warner Brothers, where they went on to develop F.E.A.R 2, which retconned the expansion, so now the expansion is not considered canon. The expansion is comprised of 2 separate small campaigns, Extraction Point and Perseus Mandate, both of which feel quite a bit different from the original game. What also feels quite a bit different from the original game through backwards compatibility, it does not have the frame rate boost, so you're only going to be able to play it in 30, which is kind of a bummer, but it still plays nice. Now, I've got to be honest, switching from the first game to this expansion really did feel like a visual downgrade. While I appreciate the added variety of environments, they don't look quite as detailed to me, and it really doesn't help the fact that it's only at half the frame rate. Otherwise, it's still quite impressive. So if you want more variety in the environments, which was kind of an old original criticism of the first game, there is more variety here. Really, it's just more F.E.A.R, so you can't go wrong there. The challenge modes make a return in the expansion, but there's no longer leaderboards in this one, only in the first game at the moment. So if you're a fan of the F.E.A.R franchise and you just want more, even though it's not considered canon, you should definitely track down a copy of F.E.A.R Files. So that was 5, or really 6 for that matter, Xbox 360 games that are disc-only backwards compatible. I wish you luck in finding these if you don't already own them. They're worth picking up to be able to play them this way. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please check out my previous video where I talk about 5 games that are still stuck on the PlayStation 3. It's episode 3 of a series I've been working on. These are classic PS3 games that deserve more love. Thanks for tuning in. Please like and subscribe, and I'll catch you later.